Warning, this podcast has stories of real-life events and true crime that happens every day. These stories may contain adult language and graphic or disturbing details not suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
132 in Bush, I've got him at gunpoint. They're pulling him out.
10-1-1, advise ready for gameplay.
God!
To another episode of War Stories. I am Tom.
And I'm Chuck.
Do you feel like we should change that someday, or we're there? That's it. Like,
I don't know, man. I'm a creature of habit, just like every other cop.
Too.
So,
well, and I don't ever know. Like back in the beginning, like I felt like, because I've recorded this, I've produced it, so I always hear. Even when we were sitting around the table, people weren't wearing headphones. I was always wearing headphones because I had to know mic levels and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we did this live around a table, we had 5 mics set up at a table, and we were all sitting at the same table drinking. And it was cool because like guests were listening to other guests' stories. That was kind of the whole point. Was we would all, like 3 people would talk about. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always listened to my own voice doing the intro to this show, and gone, I sound like an idiot.
Honestly, I mean, if we tag teamed it, that would be cool. I think it would give it a new flair, but I think along the same lines of what we currently have. And if we just, this is my new favorite word, judged it up a little bit.
Judge. Did you just learn the word judge?
I did. Yeah, I did. I learned it from a commercial.
Damn, I've said that word probably my whole judge. Just give it a little judge. A little judge.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense.
It took me. Can you spell judge?
Judge.
Right.
JUGG.
Anyway,
I don't know.
So here we are.
Silent words
we've got some episodes in the bag. We had our special fire episode, which came out a couple weeks back. So for the listener, we told you we record in advance, right? So this episode we're recording probably 2 or 3 weeks before we're about to release it. So sometimes we'll say stuff and it'll sound like we're time traveling because we reference stuff that hasn't happened yet, or anyway.
Right.
But we try to remember kind of where these episodes fall. And we had then this gentleman, Paul, who came on as a firefighter, and he had some stories to share about what's going on in LA right now with firefighting, and kind of bringing you some truth about the LA fires from the boots on the ground instead of what you're hearing from the media.
Right. Like a lot of those questions, and like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? We were able to ask that.
Yeah. But because that episode, we were 3 weeks away from releasing it, 3 or 4 weeks away, producer Dylan had a great idea to release that as a bonus episode early. So that was the only one recently that was like contemporaneous. But usually we record these about 2 or 3 weeks in advance, and that one was a little bonus episode for you guys. So I hope you enjoyed it.
And honestly, a lot of podcasts do that. You'll hear things and they'll be referencing something because they'll forget where they were, and they'll release an episode because it goes better with the stories, and you'll hear it go back. So it's a normal thing, but we try to do them in advance. Sometimes it just happens that we're going to push some episodes and bring something because it's more current. And that's just all it is. We're not playing favorites. We're just current events.
Yeah. So I want to tell you what because our next guest, our interview today, is a retired sheriff's captain, which is cool. We've had a lot of ranks. I'm not sure we've had captain. We've had above and below it. I'm not sure. Have we had? We've had fire captain, but that's a different.
I don't
rank.
think we've had many captains. Yeah. Definitely none that are still working.
Well, that's for sure. But I had to ask him because here I am way up in North Idaho. He is where he is. And although separated by miles, we started throwing out agency names, and subsequently we get into a conversation about who we each know and some of the local agencies, and then the local agency politics and who's in charge of who. And it just reminds me of what a small world the veteran community, the law enforcement community. I mean, the first responder sheepdog community isn't a big community to begin with. If you add all the vets and cops together, we're like boop,
It's
a
massive.
drop in the bucket, right? It's still 2 million people in just that community, but it's still a drop in the bucket compared to the 370 million people in the United States, right?
But it's not a crazy big, a big community. I mean, it's a big community, but it's not crazy big. I mean, we had that chief of police on the we did the math and how many chiefs of police are current. It's crazy small.
Right. So when you take them and you separate them, 700, 800,000 cops nationwide, about 1.5 million veterans, they're going to know each other. A lot of them is going to cross over. And I wanted to tell you, Chuck, to the point where, you ready for this? I had to interview someone, or not interview, but someone wanted to ask me some questions for a promotional exam. Right. So they came and met with me to try and get this special assignment. And I asked him, about his background. He told me I played college football at and named the university. And I was like, really? Okay. I was a cop at the town just north of your university when you were at college. And he's like, really? I got my first speeding ticket in your town. Wasn't me.
That'd have been amazing.
Right.
Like a full circle moment.
But I said, and I knew people that worked at the other agency that works where your college was. And I knew a bunch of people there. He goes, I knew a few people there. Like, seriously, he knew a guy in college that I knew when he was a sergeant at the police department one city over. And we're almost 1,400 miles away from that place. And we're in the same lo and behold, then another guy comes and wants to talk to me about some other thing. Turns out we knew each other through the movie business. I'm gonna try and get him to come on the show. We moved.
That's even another small
through the movie business, and he had been a cop at Santa Monica PD, and knows some of our SWAT friends and all that kind of stuff. So all of that is to say, it is a very, very small community. Be there for each other, brothers and sisters. Be out on the street. Be watching each other's backs, and enjoy the stories and just enjoy the community, because you'll miss it when it's gone, right? We even talked to a chief that talks about it's lonely being the chief because he doesn't get the same camaraderie. I wonder if a captain gets the same isolation. Let's find out from our retired captain. See what I did there? This is called
it's a good intro.
Segue in the business. So why don't you tell us about our retired sheriff's captain? Should I call you captain? Should I call you by your first name? Should I call what?
You just call me Paul. Pleasure to be here. My friends over the years have always called me Cap. C-A-P-P.
Like
I like
name.
That.
So,
Cap.
Cap. Yeah, I was Cap for a while. Yeah.
I like that. Cap.
Yeah. Cap.
So Paul's a retired sheriff's captain. He's a former California Post executive director, a police and corrections practices expert, a public safety consultant, and a government relations strategist. Ooh, tell me about that. What is a government relations strategist?
Wait a minute.
That's a lot. You've accomplished a lot. Wow. 47 years of experience.
Yeah, I've done a few things. I actually started out, I was going through some photographs, and I started out as a explorer scout in law enforcement. I ended up the same department I ended up going to work for when I turned. I was an explorer scout, and so I was actually going on ride-alongs when I was in high school, and I'd see some of the people out there at parties and stuff, and sometimes I have to kind of hide my head a little bit because I'd be riding in the car, we'd be busting the parties and stuff like that. But
oh my gosh, were you utilizing your knowledge of where these parties were to go assist these cops?
I would not do that, nor would I divulge that.
Even if it had happened.
I did something similar on a ride along when I was in high school because the kids pissed me off, and I was like, we'll see who has the last laugh now.
Yeah.
Have fun with that ticket.
It did give me some insight for years later when I was actually working as a cop on patrol, and we would go bust large parties. At least I knew what it was like to go to large parties. So, I started out very young, and then at the time in California with the sheriff's department in Orange County, you could be a reserve deputy at age 18. So when I was 18, I applied, and when I was 19, I put my first badge on my chest. Wearing a badge. Imagine that, a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah, it happened to my dad and Tom's dad, the same era. that's you could hire someone who is 19. That you could start your
20 and a half.
technically you. Yeah, you will.
No,
my
on
dad
my
started with.
agency, we hired a
Oh.
19-year-old. We hired a
Oh.
19-year-old at night. He was 19 and a half years old. He
Oh.
graduated from the academy. We hired him. He gave him a gun. He had to take it home in a lockbox. He could not carry concealed. He could not own a
I remember
firearm,
you saying that.
but he could be a cop on our department. My dad,
Wow,
LAPD
crazy.
was 20 and a half. You had to be 20 and a half when you started the academy because you needed to be 21 when you graduated.
So my dad, they could be. He started at. I went to the sheriff's academy in LA. You could be. It was like 19 or something like that. It was crazy.
You had to go to the jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I don't know.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
Were
He
you
didn't go to the sheriff's.
before you get back to what you're saying? Were you sworn in before you graduated
From high school?
from the academy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
well, when I worked for the agency I ended up working for 29 years, we were sworn in before we went to the academy.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
wow, that's
yeah.
even.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
My dad
Is
day
that
one of
because
the
you-
academy swore in.
Is that so you
Yeah.
could do ride-alongs prior, like, and learn the job? Because that's what they did with my dad, state police. They sent him out in a patrol car before he even went to the academy. He was carrying a badge and a gun, doing the job for 6 months. So like, all right, we got an academy spot.
Well,
and send him through the academy.
Yeah, no, we didn't do that. I mean, I was working for a sheriff's department. So what they did do is they put you to work in the jail
Mhm.
before you had, any law enforcement training. So, I mean, in the
Makes sense.
timeline, I started in the month of September in 1978, and then I didn't start the academy till the first part of November. So I worked for almost 2 months in the jail. And then they had this kind of screwy thing. They called it quote unquote training, but it was really labor. So when you were in the academy as a sheriff's deputy for that department during that period of time, you had to put in 1 8-hour shift on the weekend. So
Doing what?
yeah, just working in the jail.
Like a
So,
trustee?
No, I mean just doing jailer work.
Oh, I
turning-
thought they'd be like, you go
letting
clean.
everybody
So
cut
was the
cells
academy? Would you be
Wow.
over? Like, would you be working 48 hours a week, or was your academy 32 hours a week?
No. Oh no. You worked at the academy, which wasn't 40 hours, by the way. It was Monday through Friday, but you'd start at 6 o'clock in the morning. A lot of times you didn't leave till late at night.
Uh-huh.
So all of that.
That was
And then you
hardcore.
had to do all your own notebooks. We had to typewrite them ourselves. And so typewriter, I'd sit there. So after the day, and then you had to turn your notes in the next day, and you had to show them your notes. So if you had to work on the weekend, if you worked an 8-hour shift on the weekend too, you could get really behind really quick. So yeah, it was a lot of work. They later stopped that practice. I think something called the Fair Labor Standards Act came in.
It's too much hazing, guys.
Yeah, right,
It's
right.
not military.
Somebody
Quasi-military.
Somebody determined somewhere that hey, maybe we should be paying these people if they're working.
Yeah. The first time somebody got hurt.
Well, yeah, I mean, we did it for free.
I can't imagine the workers' comp case. Holy shit.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
exactly.
I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret that you may not know. Captain, you probably know this because you've dealt with liability. If you send an informant in to buy dope and they fart and fall down inside the dope dealer's house, they qualify for workers' comp.
Yes, they do. 100%. Yeah.
If-
All of that.
Now, I said that to a cop here in Idaho, and they went, "You're shitting me."
Yeah.
Liability, man.
No.
You own it.
He goes, "Okay, I get the presumptive back injuries for cops after 5 years. I get the presumptive cancer and heart problems for cops after 5 years. That would be awesome. We don't have that. We have to fight to prove that our back problems are work related. But an informant, I'm like, you can't have one without the other, apparently."
Yeah.
That's wild.
Apparently not. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a different standard, but yeah.
So you were an explorer
Yes.
in high school. My father also was an explorer. It was a great. I think that was back when the explorer program would like go to Japan and Germany.
Wow. I didn't get
Yeah,
to do anything cool like that.
Yeah, they went overseas. His
That's awesome.
his explorer post advisor was a master at raising funds, and they went to meet to do a week studying law enforcement in Japan, and they went and did a
Wow.
week studying law enforcement in Germany. Like
That's great.
that's insane. So great program. If you have it locally, you should look into it if you want to be a cop. But you then went and got hired, like boom.
Yeah. So I was in the Explorer Scouts from age 15 to 19, and then I got hired as a deputy sheriff reserve, and then I did that for a while. In the meantime, I was working in the grocery store, working part-time, and that was my also I graduated from high school, and I would refer to that as college attempt number one. I had several over the years, but that was college attempt number one, and I took a few classes, and I was more interested in doing other things. And then 21, it literally, I raised my hand and swore an oath to become a deputy sheriff about a week before my 21st birthday. I stood, they put you in the county clerk's office, and it was very informal. You stood in front of somebody's desk, and they go, okay, raise your right hand, and some clerk goes, there you go, you solemnly swear, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I do. And, so,
And that's it.
That was your swearing?
And then I went to work anyway, I went to the academy, and I worked there in the academy. And then when I got out, I got assigned to one of the other jails, which was much more, the first jail I worked at was more of a kind of slow for sentenced inmates. The second one was actually more of a rock and roll. We actually booked people in the jail. You'd work there near the back door, get people came in. You'd have a lot of situations. People came in, they were drunk. A lot of people that wanted to fight, blah, 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 all that stuff. So I did that for a while. I worked on the force. We had all kinds of really bad people in that jail. And then at some point down the road, several months, they kind of plucked me out of that. And they said, here, we're going to put you in an admin job. So I worked in an admin job for a few months. And then I got a field assignment later that year.
Can I ask you a question, Cap? You work the jails, and I see a lot of LA County guys working the jails. I've talked to a bunch of them, deputies work the jails. And a lot of them are trying to get to patrol divisions, but they get stuck in the jails for 2-3 years, and they kept trying to get out, and they couldn't. They were having a really hard time. Do you think that working in the jail, since you worked the jails, you're deputy sheriff or a deputy for the sheriff's office, and then you were a captain, do you think that working in the jails longer than a year hinders or helps you as a patrol cop?
Well, I would say it like this, which is, I think the deputy sheriffs who work in the jail and ultimately become street cops, I think have a leg up on somebody who's never worked the jail, because you get to learn about all the dynamics. You get to learn how to work informants. You get to learn how to do jail. There is a point of kind of a diminishing return where maybe you've got a year's worth of experience or whatever in the jail. It's not like a jail deputy that has 3 years of experience is going to be 3 times better as a street cop, potentially somebody with 1 year's experience, right? So, but my experience over the years with jails, and I worked every rank on the sheriff's department. I ended up going back to the jail when I got a promotion, every single one. But my experience was that over time, a lot of people decided that they wanted to work in the jail. So then you have kind of you had like a lot of legacy people who said, hey, I have no desire. I want to work here. I don't want to go out. I don't want to get promoted. I don't want to work patrol.
Which is fine.
Yeah, patrol wasn't for everybody. When I was a captain, we sent some people back. They came out, they worked, they waited their number, and they came out to patrol. And then my training sergeant would come into me and he'd say, I don't think this person's sick. And I said, well, have we done everything we can to try to help them to succeed? Maybe you put them with somebody else for a while and see if it's just that maybe it's a personality thing. But some people just cut out for it. And then they go back into the jail and they could function there fine for years and years and years. Now, there's kind of different schools of thought on whether that's right or not, whether you should be able to stay employed if you can't cut one job or hack one job or the jail.
So let me ask you your thoughts on this then. Our sheriff's department was a little bit different, and I thought to me it was a better model, but that's why I wanted to ask your opinion. For that very reason, correctional officers, there were correctional deputies, and then there were sheriff's deputies, right? And the correctional deputy, you applied for the correctional deputy position, and that was a separate classification.
Right.
Then you could later on put in an application to be hired as a deputy sheriff, or you could skip the whole process and just put in an application to be a deputy sheriff if that was open. However, the way the sheriff's department worked is you were 80 to 90% more likely to get hired if they knew who you were and saw your proven track record as a correctional deputy.
Right.
but you could not go do you could not, you didn't have dual status. It was two separate job classifications.
Right.
Now I understand the inverse is your work as a deputy sheriff. If we call out, if we send out the bat signal, everybody's coming, you have to be able to do the jail and do the street. What do you
Right.
think where do you kind of land on that?
Well, so the department I worked for went through different iterations of this. So when I first started, we had everybody who worked in the jail. We didn't have anything that was considered a custody officer. But when you worked in the jail, if you wanted to go to patrol, you had to get promoted to go to patrol. Okay, so it was an actual promotion.
Okay.
So the people who were working in the court system as bailiffs and support personnel, they were one classification, and they were the same basic classification as somebody who was working in the jail. Okay, so
Right.
scenario that I described earlier, where we had these, handful of people that came out to patrol and they didn't cut it in the training program, we had to send them back to the jail. Back in the day, those people would have had to basically take a demotion and gone back to their prior rank in order to stay employed. So
Wow.
my opinion, quite honestly, is I have a problem with the fact that somebody who's working patrol where there's a greater risk involved is getting paid the same amount of money who's working in a controlled environment where there's not as great a risk, right? So I think somebody working patrol should be getting some type of hazard pay. I mean, we do it for the bomb guys, we do it for the pilots, we do it for the motors, all of that stuff. I mean, why not?
I agree.
Yeah. So
Wholeheartedly.
But to your point, I mean, when you have a sheriff's department, let's say you have a big department and you have a certain number of people who are assigned as custody personnel, and they can never do anything else but that. Some departments have kind of a career track or career path for those folks. You can go all the way to and become maybe a sergeant or lieutenant without ever working patrol. I kind of like the idea that you have a versatile department where if you had an emergency and you needed to call on people to go out and put on riot gear, whatever, you'd have a cadre of people you could pull from the jail as well as from the field. And that was the reason why the department I work for ultimately went to a model where they had everybody at the same classification, but it had its pitfalls too.
Right.
Yeah, I can imagine it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other, depending on how you like it. I can see both arguments, really. So,
Right.
so you get on the sheriff's department, you spend a bunch of time in as a jail deputy, and then you promote through the ranks and you become a captain.
Yeah.
And I'll go back to because your story can be whatever you want it to be. I mean, it's your story. We'd let you tell it how
Right.
you want. But I'm curious. We had a chief on, and he brought up the fact that he became the chief because his career move was the right thing to do. He felt like he could do good as chief, yada yada yada, all the right things you're supposed to say in an interview. But what he said was, I gave up a lot of the camaraderie because there is the only people I can have camaraderie with are like council members and other chiefs. And
It's lonely at the top.
Yeah, it's a different model though, too, quite honestly, for a police chief than say for a captain working in a large department. But yeah, there is something to be said for when you go up through the ranks. I'll tell you, I had a lot of people that asked me, guy, do you miss being a cop? And I say, well, I miss being a 27-year-old cop. Like
Okay.
I miss being a cop working like on the midnight shift when I was young and had didn't have any sleep problems or whatever. I could do all the stuff that cops do. Didn't have all the aches and pains that you get when you get older. And I mean, it was quite honestly, I think it was probably a lot more enjoyable and a lot more fun when I was younger cop. I do a lot of work now as like say on practices cases, and I see what officers have to go through now, and it's tough. I think the cops today, quite honestly, have it harder than we had when I was doing the job.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Definitely in like the environment we work in and stuff, it's a lot different, a lot more volatile now than it was back in the day. And I think a lot of that's attributed to like cell phone videos and stuff like that.
Well,
there's also a level
true.
of lack of trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just to kind of put a fine point on what I was trying to say, which is being a captain on the department I work for was a good job. People always tell me, what are the best jobs you ever had? The two best jobs I ever had on the sheriff's department in my 29-year career, one was being a captain because I was finally in a position where I could influence change. I had my own command. I could set the conditions for what I wanted to do. I could set, have influence over the morale and everything. And then the other job was being a homicide detective. It was great.
Oh, I bet.
A homicide detective was like, like a major rush for what you do. You're fast asleep in the middle of the night and the phone rings. The next thing you know, boom, you're dressed and you're gone. You may be gone for 3 days working on a murder case.
Yeah. I did that. That was narcs for me.
That was not, yeah, narcs, the same thing. I talked to a lot of people. I never worked narcs, but a lot of people, the same thing. But, and I worked officer involved shootings when I was a homicide detective too. And that's kind of where I got some of my experience to do some of the police practices stuff too. So, when you go out to a shooting case, I have a story related to a shooting case if you'd like to hear it. I think it's very interesting. And I got permission from the guy who was involved in this. I don't have to say his name, but I told him that I wanted to tell this story, and I think you'll find it to be quite interesting. It's one of the most interesting stories I've ever heard. So when I was a homicide detective, this is probably, I'm going back to about 1987 or thereabouts, we rolled out to a report of a fatal officer-involved shooting, and a young deputy sheriff had to shoot this guy and kill him in front of wife and small child.
Oh,
yeah,
that's rough.
And what happened was, this guy was a local bad guy that everybody knew. He came from a family of bad guys. They're involved in drugs and this and that and all kinds of stuff. And he got a call to the house, and he went inside, and the bad guy had a knife up to his mother's throat, and the knife was actually starting to go in. And so he draws down on him, and he says, and he knew the guy by name, and he said, "Don't do it, don't do it. Don't do it. Do not do it. Do not do it." And next thing you know, he ends up, he sees the knife going into her throat. He makes a decision. Boom, he's gonna shoot her. So we put the case together, and I mean, justifiable shooting in every way. There was no problem with that at all. So fast forward, I run into this guy years later, and when he was still in the department, I was on the department. I think I might have been a sergeant or lieutenant back then. And I ran into him. I go, hey, you remember that officer-involved shooting I worked when you were young and I was a detective? And he said, yeah, I remember you coming out. Yeah. He goes, did I ever tell you what happened? And I said, no, what do you mean? He said, let me tell you a story. This is a story that he told. So that shooting happened like in 1987, right? Or thereabouts. About probably 12, 13 years later, he is on patrol, and he's working as a sergeant, and he's working in basically the same general area. And he pulls a car over, and it's a young guy, about 17 years old. And he walks up to the car. You know where this is going, don't you?
Yeah.
So he walks up to the car, and he looks at the driver's license, and it's the same name as the guy who he killed.
Just a junior.
Right.
This is a junior, right? Yeah. So he looks at him, and he starts asking questions like, so have you lived in, this area all your life? Yes, I have. So he's asking questions, and this young guy turns to him, and he goes, are you the one? Yeah. He goes, are you the one? Oh. And he goes, what's that? He goes, are you the one? Are you the one that killed my dad? Now he's standing on the side of the road on a traffic stop, right? He's telling me this story, and like the hair's going on the back of my neck. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean,
oh my God.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh my God, what did you say? And he said, well, it was kind of interesting what happened. He goes, I didn't know what to expect from him. He goes, I thought he was going to attack me. I thought he was going to call me every book. And he said, can you tell me what happened?
Oh.
And he said, yeah. He goes, my family never told me what happened. All they said was, your dad was killed by the police. And they never talked about it. He said, I don't know what happened to my dad.
That's fucking terrible.
So he's on the side of the road, and he said, you know what? He goes, I figured I owed it to this guy.
Yeah. He's
so
right.
He tells him the whole story. And he says, he goes, you ever see the scar? Your mom has a scar on her neck? And the guy's like, yeah. He goes, your dad had a knife that was going into your mom's neck. He goes, and
Wow.
I had to kill your dad. And he's, I'm sorry. He goes, I had to kill him because he was going to kill your mom.
Damn.
And yeah, and and the guy goes, thank you for telling me. He goes, I never knew. He goes, now I know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, now I know. And he said he ended up giving him a break. I think that he'd been drinking or something, and he's just like, hey, I'm going to call somebody.
I'm gonna have somebody come pick you up.
Wow.
He just gave him a break, right? But isn't that a crazy story?
It's like 360, you know?
It's like 3 degrees of separation. Like, what are the
Yeah.
chances that at that moment, that he's going to be stopping that young guy on that street and having that conversation?
I mean, I stopped a girl. Chuck, I think, knows this. I went to a very early in my career, very terrible accident. Young girl, wrought iron pickets through the windshield, drunk driver. She's the passenger. She lets this guy she's in love with, or thinks she's in love with, drive her car. He's drunk, drives him off an 11-foot embankment into a tree.
Yeah.
Like, he flees the scene, leaves her there with injuries to her face that hamburger, right? In some spots, right? And I sat with her until I had enough medical attention for her, and then I went out and found this piece of crap, and I hooked him up, and I put him in prison for, I think he got 11 years. Still not enough of a sentence, whatever. But I moved on with my life. I was like, whatever. It's the justice system. I don't have control of that. Go work narcs. Go come back. Come back to patrol years later. I'm on the south end of town. There's a car sitting there, and it's a white girl where you don't typically see young white girls at 2:00 in the morning. So I just stopped to see if she was lost or if she was there buying dope. And it was the teenage girl from the crash.
Wow.
And she did not recognize me, but I recognized scars on her face, and I recognized her name, and I instantly was like, this is the same girl. Look at her. She's got some scars, but she looks great. And I said, I don't know if you remember me or not. And she looked at my face, looked at my name tag, looked at my face, and then broke down into tears. And she said, I didn't think I was ever going to get to see you again. I never got to thank you for saving my life and putting that asshole in prison.
Wow.
I just never thought I was going to ever get to see you again. And so the good Lord saw fit to have me roll up on her car, and the good Lord saw fit for your partner to have to pull over the 17-year-old boy that was owed an explanation, and got a fair explanation and not one tainted by family BS, right? Got a genuine, this is what happened, kid.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's great when those 360 moments happen, because it gives not only the one affected closure, right? Like that child or that girl, it gives them closure, right? It also gives the officer closure. And there's so many instances where us as officers, we deal with something, and, you know, we constantly think about it. And that one time you get that closure, it makes that just disappear. It makes it so much easier to like go on. You don't think about it anymore because you know that person's safe. You know, I had an incident like that. Sexual assault, little girl got molested and assaulted for years. Long story short, hooked up the guy. He got some time, whatever, put it out of my mind, roll up on her. Same thing, sitting in a dark car with someone else. I'm like, oh, it's a drug neighborhood. You know, let's get this. And she recognized me. I didn't recognize her. And then she told me, I'm like, oh my God, I've been thinking about that for forever. Like, it's just, I'm so glad you're okay. And it's just those nice cathartic moments that you have that you forget about, you know, but you're still thinking about it subconsciously. And then it's a weight lifted off your shoulder. And I can only imagine that boy who, you know, got told probably all these horrible things. The cops killed your dad, all this other stuff. And when he gets to have that closure, I mean, it's just, that must be so powerful and just freaking almost life-changing. I mean, those are great stories. That's amazing.
Yeah.
The floor is yours. You can tell whatever stories you want. That was a great one.
Well, I had a funny story. I probably just switched the mood here a bit. And this is one of the funniest cop stories anybody ever told me. And I wasn't there.
Okay. Can't wait, man.
Somebody else thought it was kind of funny. So this guy's working up in the mountains, and he gets a call of an open front door to a cabin. He said it wasn't uncommon to, you know, people would have their cabins would be burglarized while they were, you know, because a lot of people are absentee owners.
Right. Sure.
goes there and he goes into this house. It's the door's open. He walks in. He kind of does a cursory search. He yells, "Anybody here? Anybody here?" Nobody comes there, and he had to go to the bathroom really, really bad. So he decides that he's going to use the bathroom, and kind of like a two-story cabin thing. And so he goes in there and he takes off his gun belt and all that stuff, and he's sitting in the bathroom. He's sitting on the throne. And all of a sudden, he looks up and he sees the doorknob turning.
Oh, Lord.
Uh-oh.
So he's thinking, "Oh, God, there's a bad guy is going to come in." So he didn't have time to put the gun belt and all that stuff. He didn't want to make any noise. So the fastest thing he could think of was, he said, "I reached down and I just reached into my holster and I grabbed my gun and I just like held it out in front of me."
Yeah.
While I was sitting on the throne.
Oh,
And the door opened and there was this old lady in a bathrobe.
Oh, shit.
And yeah. And
That's the shit right out of him.
and he's got a gun pointed at her and he goes, "I'm sorry." And she goes, "I'm sorry, officer. I didn't mean to walk in on you." And she like slammed the door. So he gets dressed real quick. And he said, he goes, "Here I was, going to the bathroom in her house, and I pointed a gun at her, and she was more concerned about the fact that she walked in on me."
Yeah, I mean, well, if you walk in on somebody going to the bathroom and they point a gun at you, it sends a message.
Oh my
Anyway,
gosh.
I just thought that'd kind of break up the bit. That's one of the funny stories that
man.
I was ever told. But
I remember being in training and we went to a call. Gal had killed herself on her ex-boyfriend's front porch, right?
Mhm.
But it was odd because she was young. She was very, very young, and she shot herself in the head, which is not typical, right?
Right.
So we're initially, gunshot victim, gunshot heard. We get there. There's a fresh gunshot victim, still warm, still like, we're like, oh, do we just have a homicide? Even though the weapon's laying across her chest. We go in, we clear the house that she's on the front porch of, and then we get, I'm like, "Boss, I gotta take a leak." The code 3 run and then clearing the house. I was like, he's like, "Find the toilet furthest away from where the dead victim is lying,
Please."
Yeah.
Oh, anyway.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Having to go to the bathroom so bad. You're like, I searched it verbally, but I have to go. And
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, the other thing I really wanted to talk about with you guys is, and I kind of have a lot of experience in this, is leadership stuff, related
amazing.
stuff. If you go to my website, I have a link on there for publications, and I've written a lot of articles about leadership. But boy, I found out early on that, and I worked for so many jerks over the years, and so many people that were just real a-holes. And I swore to myself that I would do everything I could when I got ahead to not be one of those jerky people.
Right.
And I did everything I could to try to put my people first. And I think we had made some good headway in that regard. But I really want to kind of shout out there to anybody who watches this thing, just to say, you've always got to be thinking about your people first before yourself. And sometimes you may be working for a jerk boss, and I did, and I worked for some jerky bosses who were always thinking that who didn't have that sensitivity to the troops. And my heart was always with the troops and what the troops were doing and what they needed. And anytime I took over a new command, the first thing I did was look around and say, "What do you need?" And it's always the smallest stuff. I found that you go into an operation, and this goes for anybody, it's a chief executive or whatever, the very things you could fix the smallest things that could improve the morale in a day. I'll just give you a small example. Like, I always had a thing about it. Whenever I got in a police car, I did not want to reach over to turn on the siren and have a knob be missing off of the controller.
Oh, yeah.
Or go in to get a hand.
You can slip or you can cut yourself.
And have the knobs be missing, right? So
So
like I go into the armory when I first got assigned to the command as a captain, and I see missing knobs and stuff, and I get a hold of the guy who's responsible for it. I said, look, I want you to make sure you have knobs. And he says, I'm tired of buying knobs for these folks. He goes, they're always breaking them off, and I can't keep enough of them in here. He goes, I buy them and they break them. And he goes, I just kind of reached a point where I said, I'm not doing it anymore. And I said, well, that's got to change. I don't care if it takes 1,000 knobs. If the knob break off, we buy new ones, right? Because I don't want somebody to reach for a knob and, get their finger, poked out or whatever.
Yeah. It's
Just
annoying.
just the smallest little things like that, Coming into operation, you go into somebody's workspace and you look around and their desks are falling apart. Say, let's get you new desks. Let's get you always ask this question. What one thing could we do right now that could help improve your work environment to make your job better?
Right.
Can I ask you a question regarding that?
Yes, sir.
I've seen it on both aspects where you have a captain come in. By the way, I love this technique. I love this strategy you employ, asking people, how can I better serve you? Because it shows your type of leadership that you put them first, and put yourself second, and that speaks volumes to coppers. But I've seen it on the hand where you have a new captain who comes in. And I feel like a lot of coppers are jaded when this question happens, when you employ that question. What can I do to help you here? What can I do to make the morale better? What can I do to fix X, Y, and Z? And you have a copper stand up. This happened to me. I stood up. The captain said, what can we do to make it better here? And what can we do to improve morale? I immediately rose my hand. I said, hey, our gym is lackluster. It sucks. It's not great. It's old. Based upon all these different studies and things like that. I mean, I was big into CrossFit at the time. I was like, I think that we could build a CrossFit gym here. And in conjunction with this, I mean, we can do both. I have connections and the stuff. And I started listing my resume, bam, 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 bam. And I was like, I think that would improve morale because it would show everybody that we care. And this is a patrol officer talking to a captain. And I'm just like, hey, you asked, I'm giving you. She's like, okay, well, I'm going to put you on the committee and give me a proposal. I had that proposal done in 3 hours and I gave it to her. And that was the last time I ever heard. And next thing I know, I got the cold shoulder. She treated me different. And there was all that. So I'd seen it happen numerous times. And everyone was like, dude, you shouldn't have said anything. Everyone, I'm walking out. They're like, you should shut your mouth, dude. What are you doing? Dude, that's career suicide. All this crazy. I'm like, nah, man, she's asking. I'm a just brand new patrol officer. Maybe got 3 years, 4 years on the street. Maybe 5 at that time. And I'm like, no, she's asking because she wants to know. So I'm going to give her I'm not saying anything bad. And just, this could help. And it completely blew up in my face. And that was the last time
that's not
that
right.
I ever did that.
That's not, it's not
why do you think that happens?
Well, it happens because people, like I said, kind of gets back to what I said earlier. They're not thinking about the troops first. If you're just going through the motions and saying, and you're checking a box and you're like, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to ask them, right? But if you're not going to take action on it, then your credibility is going to be zero, right?
Right.
I always made it a point whenever I took over a new command or went into work in a new place, I would ask the supervisors, the question, and I would say, who's the most disgruntled employee we have here? What is the name of the most disgruntled employee? And of course, they'd all look at each other and they go, well, that's so and so. And that's the first person I would go and I would talk to. And I would say, hey, you don't know me, I don't know you, and you probably don't like the fact that I'm even talking to you right now, but I really want to make this place better. And I'm going to give you an opportunity. And I would like you to tell me everything that's wrong with this place. Now, I had one guy says, I'm not going to tell you anything because I just don't trust you. I don't trust you. I don't trust anybody. Right. Okay, so that's fine. Over time, maybe build that trust. But for right now, I'd just say, I really have your best interest in mind. Okay, great.
Right.
This one guy in particular, I said, I was captain. And I said, I want to ride with you. I'm going to put my uniform on. We're going to ride together. And he goes, you're going to ride with me? I said, yeah, I want to ride with you. And this guy he was in the military reserves. He was sharp. He was a squared away guy, but he just had like a really bad attitude about stuff. So after a while, he just kind of looks over at me. We had coffee and he just looks at me and he goes, can I ask you something? I go, what's that? He goes, I have no idea why you're even riding in my car right now. Why are you even here? He's like, why are you even here, Captain? He goes, I just don't know. I go, well, here's why. I tend to believe that people like you probably have all of the reasons and all the answers for people like me as to how I could make this place better. But people tune you out because you're disgruntled. And I said, I think you probably have some good things you really need to say that can really help. I said, give me a couple of things. He goes, okay, I'll give you a couple of things. Then he kind of rattled off, 2-3 things. And I turned to him and I go, those are easy fixes, man. Those are easy fixes. So this gets back to your story about, the other captain. The key to this type of approach, if you're going to be this type of leader, is you got to take the action.
Right.
You gotta make that change. If you're just going to go through the motions, you got to make that change. And It took a while. That guy ended up being the number one most supported person for a promotion the following year. His attitude at the door, he got a new lease on life. I sent him off to a leadership training course for one of the larger sheriff's departments used to offer a leadership course for deputies. I sent him off to the deputy leadership course for a few days. He came back and he just had a whole new, fresh perspective on stuff.
Because you
And,
listen.
awesome.
Yeah, and I mean that's just the way I do. And I'd get in with the sergeants. We'd have a staff meeting, and I'd say, "Look, I don't want you to all sit around here and commiserate about all the bad things that all these people are doing. I want you to come into this meeting and tell me what could be better, and what you're going to do to make it better. Because we're just not going to continue to go around in circles. If you're going to have an evaluation discussion about somebody, if they're a problem and they've got issues, then you've got to fix it. If they can't be fixed, what's the next step? But if you pick up an employee evaluation, which was my biggest gripe, you pick up an employee evaluation and all the boxes are checked that this person's doing a great job when they're really not, right? That's laziness. That's total laziness. That's supervisory laziness.
If they're doing a great job and you give them all like, okay, satisfactory, and they're doing a great job and they're getting the exact same rating as someone who's a slug, who's a station queen, and hiding out.
Correct.
Exactly.
Laziness. It's laziness. It's laziness, right?
Yeah.
So it's like take the time, invest in your people, right? So I just think those are good key leadership points.
It's interesting.
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
go ahead.
No, I was just say just one more quick thing. When I transitioned out of the mainstream of law enforcement, and I took a job as a director of training for the state of California. They were kind of way behind in equipment. Particularly, all of their personnel needed phones. Only a few of them had them. The Blackberries and stuff were just starting to come in to the play. And this was back in 2007, and I got together with the staff and I said, really like to make this happen. What's it going to take? And so they came in with a budget proposal and this and that. And they said, it's going to be very expensive and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, you guys can figure out how to get the money, right? Kind of looked at them all. They go, well, we probably could. I go, okay, well, it's a priority and it's going to be important because it's going to help everybody do their job better. So I'd like you to make it happen. And they did. And that's what gets back to my earlier point where I said, if you're going to be a person who's going to be in a leadership position, you can be a captain or a director or a chief of police or whatever. Boy, take that opportunity to be able to use that position to do things that are going to help, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're the person that's always looking in the mirror and always looking over somebody else's shoulder when you're talking to somebody trying to figure out who's more important or whatever, I don't have use for you. I don't have use for those people at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that you brought that up. And I mean, sorry, Tom, I just had to say one more thing. I think that type of culture and that type of leadership is what's lacking in law enforcement today. I think the culture has shifted to burn them to learn them type of attitude where it's, hey, I can do this. I can show that I came in and I affected change this way because I got rid of some problem officers, which weren't problematic officers at all. And everything just didn't look good or something. It just whatever it was they would go after certain officers and get them in trouble so that they could promote. Next thing you know, they're out the door really quick. And then you have other coppers who come in that are captains and they are copper first, kind of like your leadership, but then I see them not get promoted as fast. and they kind of sit at the station for like a year and a half, 2 years. And you're like, I mean, it's great for us. We're like, oh, that's great, but it's weird that you see this weird shift in culture, and it's kind of backwards, because I think people that have your idea of how to lead should be the ones being promoted.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Tom. I'm telling you.
Well, I was just gonna. You brought up an interesting point that I think is true. There's a book, and I've talked about it, I'm sure. I love this book. Maybe you've read it, Paul. It's called "It's Your Ship," and
I think I've heard of it.
it's
Yeah.
one of the best leadership books I've read in a long time, because, well, for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is it gives you a very easy outline of his stuff. It's not into these amorphous, like, well, you have to really, feel this and try and inspire. No, this is what I did, right? It was the nuts and bolts of it, right? And essentially, this guy goes in, takes command of his first ship, promotes to a captain in the Navy, takes his first command, and says, I'm going to meet with every single person on the ship. Every single one. Unprecedented move, new captain says, every single one of you sailors is coming into my quarters, and we're going to have a meeting. Does it? Asks each one of them, what could we change on the ship? If I threw out the rule book, what could you change on the ship to make it better? And then where he could implement the policies, he said, okay, throw out the rule book and do it anyway. Their ship got these super high performance ratings, super high retention ratings, to the point where the Navy took notice and said, what the hell are you doing? He says, I threw away the rule book and I asked these guys what we could do to make the ship run properly. And when they, and I said, it's your ship, do it. Right. And that's the title of the book. So now I take this leadership. I came in to the current position I'm in. I have a team. And when I came into that position, some of those people I had worked with as peers, and now I'm in charge. And I looked at them, I said, this is what I think is stupid about this job. What else? And they told me. And I said, I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Okay, cool. All right, I'll talk to you in a week. And I went, boom. Came back in a week, and I said, okay, here's the policies we're changing. You're not doing this anymore. You're not doing this anymore. You're not wearing this anymore. These are all the things that I have in my power to just change. I think they're stupid. You think they're stupid. We're changing it. I don't care why they got done in the first place. We're moving on from that. These are the things I can't change on my own. I'm going to work on it as we go. Anything else? And they instantly were like, holy shit.
Yeah. That's low-hanging fruit. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I called them triage items, right? Things that you can, you show up to the ER and they've got to fix things really quick, right? To make sure that you don't, every agency, every organization has triage items. And sometimes they have a dollar amount affixed to them. And sometimes they're just, adjustments. You just can do things alone. But I fully subscribe to that. I fully believe in that type of outlook, because there's just too many people running around and they put them in leadership positions. To be fair, though, getting back to what you talked about earlier, Chuck, they have a lot of these people that are thrown into these leadership positions nowadays as, say, a chief executive, because the place is in disarray because of some event, like they had a controversial officer involved shooting, right? Maybe there's some tentacles to that reach out into different, parts of the community, and they want to bring somebody in that's going to, smooth that over and whatever. The type of person that's going to show up for that job is usually not going to be the type of person that we're talking about right now.
Right.
Their type of person up there is usually going to be a hatchet person, and they're going to have a reputation of being a hatchet person. And that's what they want. That's who they want in those jobs.
They want you to come in and cut wood.
They want you to come in and they want you to cut wood. It's tough being in that role, no matter who you are and what kind of person you are. The other thing I noticed is, that the difference. I mean, I spent a lot of time, I worked in state government, local government. It's really all pretty much the same, in that you have, when they want somebody in a role like that, they want somebody who is, for lack of a better term, hungry. You want somebody that needs to have a paycheck. What they don't want is, they wouldn't want a guy like me coming in, basically bulletproof, who could come into a job like that and say, look, if you don't like what I'm doing, you could fire me, and life is not going to change tomorrow.
Right.
They want the 42-year-old person that's got 3 kids at home, that college that they can say, look, that's person's, we want them to be able to do more of what we want them to do. And so if you're in that type of role, you've got a tougher job, because you may not be able to be the type of person that you are, because you're one vote or one step away from being shown the door. Right. So in line, that's why county sheriffs oftentimes have greater ability to,
Yes.
to they change, right? Because they speak to the voters, the voters, they answer to the voters. Voters can keep them, and the voters can make them go away. When you have a city manager that reports to a city council, and that city manager gets told by city council members, hey, we would like it better if that police chief wasn't here, then that city manager, regardless of what they think of you, is going to show you the door.
Fired. Yep.
And that's just the way that works. That's just a sad reality.
Now, I think then, Paul, you and I probably have some similar philosophies on leadership style. One of the things that we talked about is, if you have the power to change it, just change it, right? If it makes sense and it needs changing, you can always change back, right?
Right.
But also, I have told my people, and I've told the people that work around me, and it's funny because I don't work with a lot of cops. In fact, I'm probably the only person that they've had who has been in prior law enforcement in their building in years that they feel comfortable talking to, right? And I've told them, a lot of things that are directly ripped from my career in law enforcement. This is how I was taught. I know you guys don't operate this way, but this is how I was taught. So this is where my mind goes. If you tell me different, we'll do that. But one of the the things I said is, if you're telling me I'm going to change it, I can change it, and I want to change it, I'm going to change it, and I'm not going to apologize for it. You put me in charge. That's what you want me to do, is make these decisions. What I don't want from you guys, and what I don't want from any of my people, is when I ask you, why do you do it this way? Don't ever tell me, because that's the way we've always done it.
That's the way we've always done it.
I tell my people, I tell them straight to their face. I say, if you feel inclined to say, because that's the way we've always done it, then the words that should come out of your next when I ask you, why are we doing it that way, is, I don't frickin' know. Because I don't frickin' know is a more intellectually honest answer than, because we've always done it that way. You're not a frickin' sheep. You do it that way because you were told to do it that way. And when asked why you do it that way, the answer is either because I was told to, or I have no frickin' idea why we do it that way.
Right.
Well, I think we've gotten away from critical thinking.
Yeah, it's a different. I mean, we could have a spirited discussion about what people want, what they don't want. I will say one thing about generational stuff, though, and I made it a point. I used to go around and talk to people about what are your concerns, and a lot of times you go and they go, oh, the young generation, blah blah blah. I'll say, stop right there. Tell me a generation that's always been excited about the generation coming up behind them. There's never been a generation excited about the generation coming up behind them.
Right.
It's the senior generation's job to try to inspire, to try to, guide, to try to direct, and everything else. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that there's differences in commitment and everything else, but somewhere in the ranks of the group of people that a lot of the old cops have already cast aside as the quote unquote new generation are going to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Right.
And if you want them to be the type of leader that they should be, then you've got to take an interest in them. You got to invest in them.
Well, as a member of the generation that nobody wants in charge, Gen X seems to be the one where everybody's kind of afraid and they should just leave us alone. But as a member of that generation, I will tell you, I've seen some people from my generation get promoted, and I'm in a position of authority now too. And there is a certain level of, like you said, we're looking at but the generation before us, we're like, you were supposed to inspire us, you didn't. And we're looking at the generation below us, and we're like, you were supposed to be better than us, you're worse. Right? So there is that level. But what I do see is that as I get into my position, Winston Churchill, if you're not liberal in your youth, you have no heart. And if you're not conservative in your age, you have no brain. Right. Like, I look at things that I was super passionate about as a young cop, and I was right to be super passionate about them. But old cop me would go to young cop me and go, yeah, you're not going to win this fight. And
Yeah.
I don't agree with you anymore. Right. Like your
Right.
opinions on things grow and evolve and change. But the thing that never should go away is taking care of your people.
Right. 100%.
And
100%.
part of taking care of your people is giving them the tools they need to do their job.
Yeah.
The
No,
point about
100%. Yeah.
yeah, you said you were talking about knobs and desks. That's the broken windows, right? If you can't even keep a knob on a
Right.
patrol car,
Right.
Honestly, in showing your guys you care about the little things speaks
Right.
volumes. It means he is so in tune with the things that are wrong. He's going after the smallest thing, like the things that
Yeah.
we may take for granted or whatever. I mean, it shows like, oh, these are getting fixed now. That's great, and all these other things are getting fixed, and then it starts
Right.
going up, and bigger things are getting fixed. It speaks to your character. It speaks to when you're in a leadership
Yeah.
position.
Well, it's
And
also
your word is
it's
your bond.
Yeah, it's also how you treat people
Yeah.
when they're in a bad situation, like if they get in a car crash or whatever. I mean, I crashed. I've got some pictures I'll forward you of an upside down patrol car that I was the driver of.
yeah, yeehaw.
I was a solo crash. I was the only one who was in the car, was not hurt, but it was on the front page of the newspaper. And
Anytime a cop car's upside down, you're going to get on the front page.
I'll tell you. And well, you never live it down
Guaranteed.
to your whole career, believe me.
Oh, no, yeah.
Show up at your retirement party too. The picture of the upside down, blown up, like
Yes.
5 by 7, whatever. But if you've ever talked to officers who've had really difficult situations, officer involved shootings, or maybe something that didn't go well at work and this and that, the one thing that I always hear is like, you hear both ways. You hear the one says, yeah, and the captain treated me like crap, or the chief treated me like crap, or whatever, right? And then conversely, I've had people say, I was really down, and boy, the captain helped me out, really kind of, maybe it's going to be okay.
Took care of me. Yeah.
Going to work, right? I mean, I obviously, if it's something that's, really, really bad, that's a different story. But, a lot of stuff is just kind of the course of the job. You kind of go through, bad things happen and you get past them and everything else. But, you remember it. I always tell people too, don't be afraid to try to get ahead, because if you don't, I guarantee you the jerks will always try to get ahead before you. So, move up through the organization if you can, so that you can be in a position of responsibility where you can make the place good to work for, rather than letting the jerks be in charge.
Our listeners of our show know my famous conversation with my mentor when he called me, and we were street cops together. He was a 2-striper. I was a slick sleeve. He was my FTO. He kicked me out of his car because we were too close. He's like, I can't evaluate you fairly. We're becoming friends, right? That's the kind of relationship. He was my mentor all the hell through law enforcement. We still text. And he texted me, he says, I just want to make sure you're not going to be mad at me about something. And I said, what? He goes, I'm taking the lieutenant's test. Do you think you don't think less of me, do you? For taking the lieutenant's test, because of all the shit talking we've done about lieutenants over the years.
But just by that question, it means he gives a shit.
Well, what I said to him was, I said, I'm not pissed at you. And we're both Gen X, right? We're both the generation that nobody wants in charge. Yeah. Because you never know what we're going to do. And I said to him, I said, only if you promise me that you will be the lieutenant we always wanted to work for.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes, I can do that. And I said, all right, I'm gonna hold you to it. And I'm gonna I expect no lobotomies. I expect no spinectomies. I expect you to be the lieutenant we always wanted to work for. I said, I get it now. Older me gets it. You're gonna have to make some tough calls.
Yeah.
But don't
a little bit of politics.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's another hour show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would just
go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll just say this to the younger generation who are coming up. Make sure you understand patrol before you decide to promote, because you want to be respected and revered as a supervisor, and you want to show up to a scene and people want to know that you know what you're doing, and they want to feel confident that you know what you're doing, because you're the one who's ultimately in charge, and the orders that you give, we're going to have to follow unless they're unethical or unsafe. So I would say, at my agency, it was 5 years. It was like the rule of thumb, like, hey, after 5 years, you pretty much know what you're doing on patrol if you did a full 5 years on patrol. And then you're respected when you start to move up. And I think that's a good rule of thumb really everywhere, because in that first 5 years, you come in so many things and you get to witness so many things. You get to be proficient in them. And
Yeah.
get yourself out of those situations to do them correctly, and you're going to remember that, and you're going to be able to pass
Yeah.
that information and knowledge down.
I agree with that, with kind of one little caveat, which is this. Sometimes the timetable of the organization in terms of attrition and everything
Mhm.
is
Yes.
sync with that, right? So sometimes you can look around an organization and you can look at the age and tenure of people, and you can say, look, there's a good chance that 5 years from now, 7 years from now, 8 years from now, all of these people here are going to be gone, right? That's why a good agency is paying attention to this, and they're looking around. And when that happens, maybe the ideal person for promotion might have 5 years on, but they don't have that luxury. They got to pick the person that's got their stuff squared away at the 3 year mark, because if we wait for the others, we're going to have a big void or a big gap in our leadership. So sometimes that's
understandable.
it's not always possible. It's a
So-
good rule.
I got onto the dope assignment at my agency after 3 years.
Mhm.
3 years I got into working dope. It's pretty fast.
That's very fast. Yeah.
It's very fast.
But you get to learn a lot.
I learned a lot in 3 years. I came into the job with a lot of experience from my father being a cop.
Mhm.
So I some of that aspect of it was front loaded, but ultimately I benefited from what Paul's talking about. Our agency and some of the career trajectories made the dope spot come open sooner rather than later. And then by the time I would have been able to put in for it, the next time I probably would have promoted to a position where I couldn't put in for it. Right.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I turned down taking the 2-striper promotion. I turned down the idea of staying out and taking another 2-striper test, right? Because I'd just come out number 2 on our 2-striper. Well, long story. I got the dope spot, and I chose that over staying out on the street to try and wait and promote, because I knew the chance would not come around.
There
again.
you go. That's kind of
Right.
what I'm talking about.
And
And I
that's
know
good
what
too.
you're talking about, Paul. At smaller agencies, if you
Mhm.
see this, if you see your shot, you got to take it. And if you're the leader, if you're in a leadership position and you're not grooming your new people to take
Yeah.
your spot, if you're not a sergeant grooming some of your slick sleeves to be 2-stripers and sergeants, if you're not a lieutenant grooming your sergeants to be lieutenants,
Mhm.
you should never be afraid of the guy behind you.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you're afraid of the guy behind you, it means you think you're stuck in your spot. If you know you're not stuck in your spot and you know you're going to promote, then the guy behind you is the one you select and train and mentor to take your place.
Yeah.
Right. So you can
So-
move up.
So to that point, I always felt, and this was really, I think if you could ask around anybody that ever worked with me, I think would support this, which was, to
Mhm.
me, the ultimate symbol of accomplishment and achievement and success of a leader is if somebody that you developed ends up being your boss someday,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then
Very much.
Yeah.
You've done your job
Mhm.
far better than you ever could have if you developed it. And now I retired from my department in 2007, but I still get the emails. I see who's at the leadership of the organization, at the top of the organization. And several of them are people that I worked alongside that were coming up through the ranks when I was, like a lieutenant and a captain. And they were good people, and they had a lot of great potential. And there's times where you have to take, you have to also be willing to let your people go. I mean, I had good people that I said, they'd come to me and they go, I really feel disloyal because I have an opportunity to go work over here or work over there. And say, no, that's a golden opportunity to go work over there. That's a high
Yes.
profile. You take advantage of that and don't look back. The department's been here for 250 years. It's going to be fine without you in this spot. Don't take the opportunity.
You want to turn a good underling or a good, someone you supervise, whatever. You want to turn a good one into a bad one.
Right.
You remove opportunity from them.
Yeah.
You show them,
Yeah.
I appreciate you so much. I don't want you to grow as
Right.
in your career. I appreciate.
Right.
And here's the thing: you're going to lose them anyway. Eventually,
Right. Oh,
You can
eventually.
only
Right.
keep them for so
Right.
long. So,
Right.
do you want to lose them in a way where they feel supported? You maintain that relationship, And then when they come back with more experience and more power and more ideas.
Yeah.
And then you guys work together in the future on another opportunity as peers or friends.
Right.
Or do you want them to go, F that MFer? When I get back, I'm going to make my life's mission to, because he's, like they're,
Right.
and it both happened. So anyway,
Yeah.
Yeah.
well,
That's
are you
funny.
right, Paul? This could be a whole episode in and of itself.
Yeah.
But we do want to end. First we want to talk about what you're up to, because
Sure.
I know you're doing consulting stuff like that. But before that, we always give our guests a chance to dedicate their episode to a brother or sister, officer or friend that's fallen. And so I know you understand you have your own dedication for somebody you'd like.
Yeah. So when I was working on the sheriff's department, working in the training division, we had a young deputy sheriff that worked for us. His name was Jeremiah McKay. And in 2013, February 2013, he was murdered by a guy by the name of Christopher Dorner. You may remember that shootout. Yeah.
Yep.
And Dorner killed a couple of police officers, one in Riverside, and he killed Detective. He did kill Detective A as well up in Big Bear, and really was just a. McKay was a great guy by all accounts, and I think of the legacy of my time with the department, and since then there's been a lot of people that have come and gone, and a lot of people sadly have been killed in the line of duty. The list goes on. I could make a lot of dedications, but in advance of here today, I thought it was appropriate because the anniversary of his death is coming up here in a matter of a couple of weeks, and I think it's important for us to never forget the fallen. And I also want to mention that if I think one of the greatest charities that's out there right now is the Tunnel to Towers Foundation and the work that they're doing. A lot of people are skittish about charities and who they are. What they do and how much money I think they're really good people. They're doing good work. They're helping first responders, especially people killed in the line of duty, injured in the line of duty, military, everything. So those I think those are good causes.
So yeah, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation can be found. I believe it's at www.t the number two
T22.org, right?
T22.org.
Yeah, .org, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then the other thing I was going to mention is what I'm doing nowadays. For the last 10 years or so, I've been working as an expert in police and corrections practices. I get called by lawyers who have cases, and I do a lot of work. I defend police officers in the state of California who are, agencies that are being sued with cases. And then outside of California, there's some cases that are where there's bad police involved, and policing things happen during policing, and they get sued, and they want experts to.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done that work all across the country, but I enjoy it. I say no a lot. I get calls on cases, and I say, no, I'm not your person, and that's on both sides. They'll call me and they'll say, we want you to defend this officer, and they'll run it down. I'll go, I'm not your guy. This is really tough. That you might as well just write these people a check and move on.
Right.
Yeah.
But I still feel like I have something to contribute in some way. I write some articles from time to time. I haven't written anything in a while, but I'm always available if somebody wants to send me an email. They have questions. I do my best to try to respond to as many people as I can to try to help out and give guidance.
Mm-hmm.
But I took on a lifetime of servitude, and I figured I'm not going to give up yet.
Yeah, and especially
That's
not
amazing.
when there's work to be done. So,
Yeah.
well, Cap, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And rest easy, Detective McKay. We got it from here. Chuck, what do you got for us?
Well, Cap, thank you so much for coming on today. And if you're interested in getting Paul's services, you can go to www.paulcap.com. That is PAULCAPP.com. I want to say thank you today for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us on our Instagram at war_stories_official and our Facebook at War Stories Podcast. If you're already following, We'd really appreciate it if you could share our posts and help spread the word. You can also check out the link in our bio on both platforms to find all of our social media, the media links, and website. Our podcast is available on all major streaming platforms, including YouTube. If you'd like to support us, head over to www.warstoriesofficial.com and grab some gear. Do you have a story to tell? Do you know someone who does? We're always looking for law enforcement, corrections officers, dispatchers, firefighters, medics, and veterans, but also those ER nurses and ER doctors, because you guys got some awesome stories to feature on the show. If you're interested, email us at booking.warstories@gmail.com, and we can also get you booked there. But you can also go over to LinkedIn at War Stories Podcast and talk to Dylan, our producer there, and he can get you booked. That's probably the fastest way right now is through LinkedIn at that War Stories Podcast LinkedIn, and we can get you booked there. We'd love to have you on, and if you know somebody who'd be a great fit, give them that info, give them that booking, give them that LinkedIn, and have them check us out. You can also check us out on TikTok at www.tiktok.com or
Yeah, it's
Stories
still alive.
Locker Room. Yes.
And Facebook and YouTube Live for Locker Room Live. For those of you who want to join us, go to our YouTube page, like, subscribe, Facebook, like, do all the things, right?
Hit the notification bell, hit all that stuff.
Yeah, do that.
And you'll
Share
be
us
notified.
around. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And until
Thank
our
you
next
for-
episode, come home with your shield around it.